I also speak for the both of us and an extended group when I say that we agree with a lot of what has been said, and those principles are driving the work, even prior to this really being in the limelight, I'll say. And, we're looking forward to continuing that work. And I think the other thing that it's done is in the instances where maybe that consensus hasn't been there, it's given us the knowledge to realize that there are some educational pieces or transparency pieces or communication things that we need to tighten up to make sure that our parents and our stakeholder groups really understand the work that we're doing, the why behind that. So thank you for that, and I know that you'll continue to support the work in that way. So the first option that we want to talk about is a full technology opt-out, and this option I just want to lead by saying needs further review. That work you'll see in a few minutes. Closer to the end of this discussion, we'll share with you a proposed timeline of work that we plan to carry into the upcoming school year. The reason the full technology opt-out needs further review, actually there are many reasons, and I'll comment on a few, but this is probably not an exhaustive list, as we've not engaged our teachers yet really meaningfully around this, our principals and parents outside of the group that has been partnering in this work. So availability of print resources is something that I want to start with. Many publishers do not create print resources anymore. We know that particularly, with some textbooks and things, publishers aren't always offering that. Some of them do. There's obviously a cost to that. So how we would access those resources should they be available, or alternate resources should they not be available, what would need to be ordered, placing those orders timelines, et cetera. That takes some meaningful work that we intend to investigate, but that's one key factor. The cost of replacement print resources when they're available is certainly something that we would need to factor into an upcoming budget cycle should this be an actuality. There are plenty of instructional considerations that we would want to meaningfully investigate with our teachers to make sure that they would be equipped with instructional and professional learning practices to support any pedagogical changes or resource changes that the district may make. And we always have our teachers who are in front of our students at the forefront of those conversations and would not want to make a last-minute shift without making sure that they were adequately prepared. Plenty of other implementation considerations that I'm sure will come from further conversation around this as a potential future option. I mentioned professional learning. Our flexible instruction days, I do want to mention that while this doesn't weigh the most heavily on any decision, because we access them so infrequently, and hopefully will continue to do so in the future, that is something that we want to make sure that all students have equitable access to learning when those days should be needed. We also would need to consider, as Mr. Oberecker said in his opening statement, what impacts of full device or one-to-one device removal, what impacts would we actualize for students when it comes to differentiated and personalized learning opportunities? Because certainly there are many ways that we're using formative, summative assessment data for teachers to make and turn around quick instructional decisions for students for differentiation, enrichment purposes, but also, that at-home time over the summer, homework, things like that, when students are practicing on their own, and with those platforms and tools, they're able to get real-time feedback about the work that they're doing and that they're practicing a skill correctly and not incorrectly. So not saying that those things can't be done, but those things would certainly need take some time to further investigate to make sure that we're doing that work properly. And I want to say last but not least, but I'm sure it's not last, as this is likely not an exhaustive list of considerations, but a very strong one. We have multi-year licenses and leasing agreements that we're engaged in at this point. So I just want to be clear that removing iPads, tablets, whatever, laptops, whatever word we use there, removing them this summer does not mean that we immediately have access to new money. So I just want to be clear about that. So that full technology opt-out is something, and again, associated timeline, we'll talk about in a few minutes, but we intend to further investigate as a potential option in the future. But at this time, the full technology opt-out is not an available option for the 26-27 school year.
Then we're also looking at an option that is known as whitelisting. So you might be familiar with blacklisting, where you've got your access to the internet, and then you've got your web filter in place, and there are buckets of things that are being blocked. And then from there, you further continue to block things and block and block and block until it is distilled to what you want. Whereas whitelisting works the opposite way. This is it. These are this list of websites are the only things that this device can get to. So that's another option that we are looking at. And that one could be put in place in a much quicker timeline, but I think we do need stakeholder feedback on that one as well, because there would be impacts in the classroom and some teacher moves that would need to be made as well. So we would need to explore that further. And it would be in furtherance of the guardrails that are already in place. I did want to make sure I put in here, we've heard a lot of stories, anecdotes from the community during public comment about things that have been seen on devices, and I just want to make sure that publicly everyone is hearing that we do have our internet filtered. We use LineWise as our internet filter. Branching off of that are the classroom-facing piece, ClassWise. You've heard a bit about that over the last few months, which was deployed in August 2024 to classrooms. And then you've got Custodio, the family arm of that. It all comes from the same web filter. And within that web filter, those buckets I was referring to, those things come pre-canned. We can edit them, but it's a very comprehensive list. These are just a few examples of categories that are blocked on district devices. So you've got your mature and explicit are blocked, proxies and VPNs, any way that a user would try to mask their location or identity, as well as AI tools. We do block those. YouTube is blocked on all K6 devices, the app and trying to get to it through a web browser. That is fully blocked K6. 7 to 12 and staff, they have what used to be called safe mode. It is now called restricted mode, which is like a further filtered version of it. We do block gaming K-12. I'm talking about like your Roblox, your Fortnite, like your heavy hitters. And we do block social media, TikTok and Instagram, etc. You want to talk about the last three there, Dr. Brisido?
Yes. So the remaining three options that we have in this presentation will be happening. So unless you direct us otherwise, these are things that are actually already in the works. We've talked about the first one at a recent meeting where we will be prohibiting the use of screen time in recess, and nobody intended for that to happen. I think that was probably a casualty of a long and terrible winter, but that certainly is not our norm, and we're interested in resetting that and reestablishing those guidelines. So certainly no screens during recess, and limiting to the greatest extent possible screens during brain breaks and other social times. And while I say limiting, not prohibiting, I just want to be clear about some things. So there are times, should a screen during a snack time or during a social time be our go-to? Absolutely not. There may be times, and I'd like to not handcuff our teachers in this way, where, during that transition where students are coming in from the playground and they're having a quick snack before they transition to English language arts. If a teacher needs to have a quiet conversation with a student or a group of students based on something that happened that day, or have a moment with an instructional aide because something needs to change about the afternoon, I'd like to have the teachers exercise caution, but I'd like to not prohibit fully if they need 90 seconds to address something in the classroom. So that's the recommendation there. A strong reduction and or a prohibition of technology in those spaces. Those conversations are already happening, and we're prepared to memorialize that in a guideline for instructional staff and really be clear about the expectations as we start the school year with our principals as well. So the second of the remaining three options is reducing access to gamified learning. We have an EdTech resource list. It's on our website. We review that annually and actually every month. We have a process within the district where folks can ask for permission for something to be vetted and or considered. And Mr. Oberecker's team and my team, we meet regularly. We have a process that we're reviewing, SIPA, COPA regulations, instructional purpose for things that are requested, cost, access, age of use, all of those things. And so that's a process that happens all the time. In addition to that, every single budget cycle and leading up to, we survey our faculty to ask, and what is it that you like using? What's meaningful for your students in your classes? And we also run analytics reports to see what tools, what ed tech tools are being used by what age of learner, in what ways, in what classes, and we use that to inform perhaps approval of new resources for the upcoming year, but also the reduction in things that may not be used as effectively as we'd like. Maybe we can't afford anymore, and there's a replacement tool that we could use, whether it's tech or not. So that process is ongoing and has been in place for several years. But we do anticipate, partially because we recognize that balance in our classrooms is very, very important, mostly because we recognize that the balance in our classrooms is very important, but also we know that this is important to the public as well. So we're taking another look at that before we share that with faculty as we move into the next school year. So we can expect a reduction in access to those apps that have, I'll say, less of priority or quality instructional use. And then the last item there that is in place for next school year, and this has been in place for quite a while, the board and the public, you're aware that we've adopted some new core resources this year in terms of ELA and math. Our focus this year was very heavily on instructional practice with the core resources, and assessment focus really was secondary, and that's something that we're looking more carefully at in the upcoming school year. We have teams in place that are modifying our assessment plans for the upcoming school year. We administered a number of assessments online this year, certainly not all of them. There was about a 50-50 balance in our elementary schools with some of those core resource assessments because of some of the gains that we knew our teachers would get from administering the online assessments, the immediate access to information. We're scaling that back for next year, and we're going to be accessing more paper assessments than online assessments than we did this year. That's a plan that's been in the works, and our teachers have heavy input in that. So we're looking forward to that and making sure that everybody knows the plan before 26-27 begins.
Thank you, Dr. Pacito. And speaking of timelines, I know that we've spent some time putting that together, and would you mind sharing what the district's next steps are as they relate to that timeline?
Sure, absolutely. Ms. Cameron, could you put up the other document? It's answered here in narrative under that last question, but we also have a graphic that is probably just a little bit easier to make sense of. So this is the timeline for initiation for the tasks that we just discussed. So as Mr. Oberecker previously noted in a recent meeting, we're launching ClassLink for families that will be live August 2026. Also in August 2026 is the launching of Custodio, and this is for families that opt in, of course, but that is a tool that we expect will be utilized and hopefully will be appreciated and give families some nice control and some good information there. Those two things you can expect to see in 2026. Then in the fall of 2026, what we'd further like to do to consider some of those possible options moving forward is to gather input from our students. We haven't collected student voice normally in visionary leadership meetings this year about their learners and their balance with technology and the impact and the role that they believe it plays. So we'd like to get some information from students, from additional families, and thank you again to those that have, have shared input, from teachers as well as from other stakeholder groups regarding screen time technologies and the like. So we expect to gather that information in the fall, and then in late fall, early winter, really analyze those findings and put some recommendations together that meet our targets and would be useful to consider moving forward. And we intend to present those to the board and the public no later than February 2027 committee meeting. And that actually very nicely and purposefully aligns with our budget planning process for the 27-28 school year. So should any of the recommendations be budget impacting, and likely they will, whether that's a budget transfer from one area to another, or a budget reduction or a budget add, we want to make sure that we're prepared with the resources and the time for planning to make those things happen appropriately.
Thank you again, Dr. Pacito. Questions from committee members or from the board?
I had some. Thank you both for putting this together. It was very thorough. So in terms of the timeline and collecting and reviewing data, is the primary focus to analyze either the sort of the full tech opt-out or the whitelisting and web restriction? Sounds like the other three measures are going to be put in place no matter what, right?
I mean, I can tell you the whitelisting doesn't need a whole lot of.
So that was my next question. Thank you.
To us, it's more about, let's look at some usage analytics when we've got this, class link in place. We
Right.
can't measure this stuff in Clever right now with the free tier. We'll have that in place in the fall. That'll give us time to send out a meaningful survey and get some feedback from our community. We've obviously gotten lots of feedback here in this setting, but we need to hear from all families and students and teachers and, administrators. So that really, I think, would be the biggest driver of, our ask for some time here in the fall to get some usage and survey data.
So for either path forward, either solution, that would be the time.
I mean, I think the impacts of the full tech opt-out, I mean, you can see just the bolded list, which is not exhaustive,
Right,
to Dr.
right.
Pacito's point. That is definitely going to require a lot more, thought
Right.
and deliberation. The whitelisting one, that could be turned around rather quickly, and it could be as simple as an opt-in form that a family would say, yes, I would like to opt into that. They would get a list of, here are the websites, this is all that your child's device can get to.
Right.
But again, we need to get teacher input on that, and at least some teacher awareness out there, because, there are some teacher moves that would be required from them
Okay.
for something like that.
Thank you.
Other questions from, yes?
Are we just thinking a survey or perhaps maybe a task force? What levers are we thinking?
I think definitely a survey, and we've looked at some surveys from that other districts have used, that some established organizations have used, and there are some things that we like involved there. And task force and/or forums, for sure. I think that we agree, and we've discussed that face-to-face input, more than just a survey, in addition to, is really important. And again, student voice, teacher voice, kind of all levels of the system really need to be represented there. So we plan to systematically put that together where we can reach different groups in person in the fall.
Can you talk a little bit more about this reducing access to gamified learning apps? Because what I thought I heard you say was that you were looking at reducing the number of apps that were available. Has there been any thought to reducing the amount of time that's spent on those apps, as opposed to just making fewer of them available?
It's really both. It's both. It's, I'm sorry, can you hear me? So The list that we have that's approved is pretty exhaustive, and we've noticed that we have some duplicacy on there. So if we have tools that do the same sorts of things, which is most effective, right? So we're looking at that in terms of not just frivolously reducing what we have, but really purposefully targeting the use of high-quality tools. But in addition to that, we're always talking about quality instructional practices, and we have a lot of professional learning tied to that. And there's a lot of new things certainly going on in the district, but making sure that teachers feel supported in setting those guardrails in their classrooms by themselves. And when it comes to small group instruction or centers or things like that in the classroom, what are some other ways that we can do hands-on learning and not just laptop learning for student groups that aren't directly in front of the teacher at that time? And we have some great activities that are being facilitated by our instructional coaches this summer that really involve some book studies with teachers and some actually creation of materials that would replace some easy to access online learning tools in situations like I've described, where small groups are meeting independent of the teacher.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for putting this together. It is helpful to have more insight into the district's perspective. Has the district considered a separate approach for our elementary school students as opposed to our middle school and our high school students, or is this just the global approach in general?
You good if I take that? And you can certainly add on. Yes, a tiered approach. We took that recent approach with the writing of our new FIT application, if anybody was able to see that, considering developmental ages of students and what's appropriate for them in terms of use and citizenship, accessibility, all of those things. Not to mention that the tools themselves are targeted for different ages of learners, but extensively, that's the work that we would plan to do in the fall, is use the information that we collect to make recommendations, perhaps for an early learning band, an upper elementary band, secondary, and so forth.
Same with like our guardrails. I mean, they're more restrictive at the elementary level for sure. It's not like an elementary student can get on that iPad and go to the App Store and get whatever they want. They have no access to that at all. So that's just another layer of this.
Understood. I think I'm not only concerned with the guardrails, but just the access to the use of technology, using technology at that age. And do we need a one-to-one for that time span? I don't know that that's necessary. I just don't know if you guys considered that when you were planning out your approach. So I just wanted to get some clarity around that. So thank you.
I do still have some questions on the technology side. Do we, across the board, do we block like advertisements? I know there's some gray area on what
We do the best we can with that, is the best way I can answer that. We do the best we can with that, yes.
Yeah.
If there is a way to block it that I'm unaware of and I'm made aware, we will do it. But yes,
Okay.
some of these were at the mercy of the web browser, as you know.
advertising companies, yeah. Yeah, because I guess my assumption here is some of the stories that we heard are because of advertisements and I won't go down this rabbit hole, but their interest of not always doing what's best. So I just wanted to see if we can, or if we do, just block all advertisements across the board. On the other side of that as well, actually this is pretty minor, but when we start to talk about this, I just want to make a small request that in terminology we're using like allow or deny instead of white and black, just for it's not a good and bad thing. I know.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was just trying to use the terminology that is used in the field.
Yeah,
yes,
I just wanted to provide that feedback.
No problem.
Moving away from like the technology side of things, I guess. So after you met with some of the community members, what was the sort of underlying, or what was the takeaway from the district in terms of what the requests were and what the concerns were? And does these address the majority of them, or some of them are the easy to get to with a short time frame? I know there might be a lot to answer that, but in general, I'm just trying to figure out, like, how well do we understand what the current group of parents are asking for?
I'll start, and you could certainly chime in. I mean, I think it was, I'm so sorry. Let me lean in closer. Sorry about that. I'm not used to this seat. I would say that the conversation was very productive, and I would like to say that learning occurred on both sides, right? So there are a lot of goals, procedures, and priorities that we have in place as a district that the public may not have enough awareness about. So that was a key takeaway for me, just sort of routine things that we do here to prioritize high quality instruction. And certainly balance is something that we talk about all the time, and we have vetted processes in place, but we should talk more about that in ways that families really know that that's happening. So that was a clear takeaway for me, because I don't think that there was any topic of conversation that really threw us for a loop or wasn't something that we had already been investigating or had in place or something like that. So transparency in that process is very key, and clear communication and making that communication available to all families and not just those that are showing up here at the board meeting. That's something that's really important to us. So that was a clear takeaway. A clear takeaway is that there are a group of families that would prefer that their students not have devices, maybe at all. And that's why, that's something that we will certainly very carefully investigate. What I want everybody to hear is, while that may be an option right now, that there are so many things that would really throw our classrooms for a loop with our teachers and equity and access. And not to say that kids are on screens all the time. They're not. But when they are, it's purposeful, and we need an alternate for that I don't think can realistically be put in place this summer due to resources and professional learning with teachers. So I think those were very clear takeaways. I think that there's a lot of meaningful input, and we have a lot of really invested and well-read and educated folks in this room, administratively and in our schools, and certainly in our parent population. We all want the same thing. I think that was one of our final remarks. We really all want the same thing, and partnering in this is something that's really important. I don't know if I missed any clear takeaways.
No, I agree. I mean, nothing was really surprising during that meeting. Tech directors do meet, the Chester County tech directors do meet, and this is obviously part of a broader sort of movement. So, it was not a surprise. But in fact, the web opt-in, that idea actually came at that meeting. That was actually proposed by one of the parents at that meeting. And, that really... That landed with me. It was like, this seems like something that is actionable and could have a desired effect here right away. It paired with some of the other kind of screen management tools that we have in place and we give access to. I did think that the Custodio would land a little bit with more of a splash. That didn't really land all that well. I'll just be honest here, but I thought the meeting went well, and we've continued to get lots of good resources. We did get a sample survey last week that I truly appreciated and replied to the folks at Senate. I could definitely see, Dr. Cito, some of those questions need to be in our district survey, for sure.
And maybe just one or two things that I'll add. We try to center our conversations around the distinction between that purposeless scrolling, that consumerism, versus planned quality instruction. We do discriminate here as a district. We discriminate those two types of use. So keeping that at the forefront and seeing that we have consensus there, hopefully moving forward, will be helpful. And also, all districts are dealing with this. We are sort of like in the backlash of having all of these ESSER funds that were thrown at districts 6 years ago, and we spent all of this money on ed tech tools and conditioning, pulling back from that is a process, because different groups of adults and students become married to particular resources that level up their program, and pulling back and finding a replacement is a process that we want to make sure everybody's comfortable with.
Yeah. Thank you so much, both of you. I do want to say that I genuinely appreciate, because it does feel collaborative, even though I'm not in those meetings, but the feedback that I'm getting is collaborative. So I think it was mentioned as well, having a task force is an amazing idea. The only thing I want to add to it though, and along those lines, like, you're the educational experts. Like, I put my trust in you guys for that. I'm nowhere near qualified to talk about even technology use in an educational setting. But the only piece that maybe more on a personal level that I've seen thinking about this and talking with my family is everything that happens outside of the school. And even with some of the parents in my network, it's been, we can tell when our kids are on, good or not, or educational or not. We can always kind of tell when our kids have used technology more in the school. And I just want to make sure that as which I'm sure we will, but as we're continuing this conversation, I just want to make sure that we're also putting some level of focus on the things that the school can't control, and what parents see outside of the school. Obviously, you're the experts in education, and I appreciate everything that you do, and our parents are the experts in their kids, so to speak. And I really just want to make sure that is also part of our decision-making process, is the feedback that we're getting about things that we don't have insight into naturally. So that's the only other thing I wanted to add.
I think that's very fair. Thank you, Mr. Weiser. And I just want to make sure, I think you said meetings we've been having with the parents. I just want to not give us credit that we haven't yet earned. We had one meeting with a group of families, and I know many of them are in the audience today, and we do plan to continue that work. You've heard our plans, and many of these plans were in place well before these conversations hit the board level. But really, we have not convened additional meetings yet, because we know that there's some conversation about, are these board goals, what's happening here, who's playing what role. So we just want to be clear on that action plan before we, get out over our skis. But we're still continuing this work, and we do plan to, as we mentioned earlier, engage various stakeholder groups.
Thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Weiser. And thank you all for the... Oh, sorry.
Yeah, a few
Mr. Overland, go for it.
I have the Victoria voice today, so. Well, first of all, I want to thank you, because I think this is a great example of the community bringing a concern to the board, to the administration, and there being immediate action to take it seriously, to meet with community members, and take immediate steps, even if it's not going to be the ultimate goal of what they're looking for, putting steps in the way to address some of the concerns. So thank you for that, because I think we are making some really meaningful progress, and we're going to take some actions for the next school year that will make a difference. One thing that I didn't hear mentioned that I was curious about is an ability to have to opt out of bringing technology home, with the exception of like a FID day where you might have to have that to be able to participate. But generally, to say, I don't want my child to bring home a computer or tablet. That seems like it should not be difficult, but I don't know. What are the thoughts there?
Certainly not all students take their devices home every day. But I will say, at this point, we do administratively recommend that students take their devices home every day for a few reasons, or probably more than a few, but I'll at least just mention a few. Oftentimes with FID days, we don't know that we're having a FID day the following day when students are leaving, and we don't know how many may happen subsequently. So we want students to be prepared, and with parents get to make at-home decisions. You're not getting that out, or you have your custodial controls on and so forth. But we'd like students to have access in the event that they need to for or if someone gets ill and they have an extended absence, all of those sorts of things. But also, especially at the elementary level, teachers aren't assigning lots and lots of homework. So it's probably quite often that students don't even need to get the technology out, but tools that students can use at home should parents want them. And we do get these questions. There are groups of parents that do want meaningful work for their students to do at home. And ExactPath, some of the Savvis resources, just to name a few, there are really excellent tools that kids can use, get feedback, and practice skills that they need to work on, right? That they're not meaningless skills or skills that they've already mastered, but there could be challenge work, there could be creative work, or things that their personalized learning path has placed them on as a good sort of way to level up. And we have many families that are asking us for that sort of work too. So we do, at this point, we recommend that students take their devices home, and how they use them is really up to their parents' jurisdiction when they're there. But for the reasons that I just mentioned, and probably others, that's where we're at right now.
Okay. I think that's something we need to look at, because I understand that, and I certainly get that there are parents who ask for it, and then those ones are probably not going to opt out from having the device come home with them. But my kids have pretty much only brought them home when we're thinking there might be a FID day. I know you can never predict it. And I think it could create some of the power struggles and concerns that we've heard from the community. Just having it, even it could create a difficult situation. So I think that needs to be one of the things that we look at as we move forward here. As we're considering an opt-out or whitelist, I think, not or having a request to not have that come home on a regular basis, there's always going to be exceptions, should be something that a parent should be able to decide. That's my view on it.
We could definitely look into that and add it to our list of things that we investigate to report out on.
Okay. Thank you again.
I don't think this needs to be said, but just in case, to get it off my chest. I feel like sometimes when we're talking about opt-in and opt-out, my thought process here is, in these cases, maybe making parents opt in and having the default in younger grades at least, maybe having the default assumption is that they won't have tablets. And if a parent does have, extra requests for, additional learning opportunities at home, and the parent can manage that properly, then they can opt in to a program like that. But I feel like that's my request, and I think it's just the mentality of maybe defaulting to not having them may do some good too. But my thoughts. Now I'm done.
Thank you, Mr. Weiser. And thanks to the group for a great conversation. With that in mind, we are going to welcome visitors up. Reminder that we're welcome to speak for no more than 3 minutes. But I would, again, just reiterate what Mr. Overland said about how this is really an example of the community coming together and sort of working the process the way it's supposed to be worked in a, in this kind of structure, presenting issues and discussing them. So with that in mind, I'm very happy to welcome Katie Castigliori.
She had to leave.
Oh, okay.
She's going to email her comments.
Okay, thank you. Then Elena Altas, come on down.
Hi, my name is Elena Altas. Okay, my name is Elena Altas, and I live in the borough of Phoenixville. I want to talk about moderate and intentional use of educational technology. To quote Jared Cooney-Horvath, learning is deliberate and effortful. It requires sustained focus, thrives on emotional connection, and succeeds when skills can transfer flexibly between contexts. Yet by design, EdTech undermines these biological realities. It fragments attention, severs emotional synchrony, and confines learning to a context so narrow that knowledge struggles to escape the screen, the digital delusion. EdTech is a big business. The claim is that it is effective in improving educational outcomes, but the data in support of that is questionable. Even the meta-analysis cited by ISD-ASCD shows only very slight impact, and we have to ask how this compares to what it is replacing. And what is moderate use? ISD cites a recommendation of 20 to 30 minutes twice per week. That doesn't require one-to-one devices. It's well documented at this point that reading from paper leads to better comprehension, that writing things down by hand aids memory and deeper learning, and that handwriting in early school years builds essential fine motor skills. EdTech cannot be evaluated on its own. It must be evaluated in the context of what students would be doing instead. I'd also like to address the idea that EdTech is different from and better than consumer tech. To quote Emily Turkin, EdTech is big tech in a sweater vest. These are billion-dollar companies competing for kids' attention and data. Flashy and gamified keeps eyes on the app and provides more data for the companies. They aren't in the business of moderate use. We are told that there is a robust review system, but then why are kids coming home hooked on Prodigy or Minecraft? When changes are made to the approved list, is there any kind of notification or explanation for parents? We hear a lot about personalized learning. Kids will get what they need from the app. But as parents, we have reason to be skeptical based on our own experiences. The apps my second grader uses during WIN don't work for her. She's disengaged during ExactPath, if she does it at all, and in Epic Books, she listens to books instead of reading, even though at home she reads chapter books. Some kids will pick easy books on the apps to rack up points. Maybe there's some data we're not seeing here, but it seems to me that this works best for the highly motivated self-learners, who are not typically the kids who need the most help. There are reasons to have tech in the classroom for accommodations where needed and to teach targeted skills, not to replace pencil and paper learning. What really makes a difference is the human aspect. These personalized apps separate the students from the teacher, and the teacher is reduced to a screen monitor. The teachers in our schools are amazing. My kids don't come home and talk about what they did on their iPads. I have to dig to get that info. My second grader talks about their mealworms or the book the teacher read. My kindergartner will come home and start replicating an experiment. One day, my second grader came home so excited that they got to write on their desks in class. The teachers are amazing, and we need to support them more, not to focus on these apps. Thank you.
Chris Lowe.
Good evening. My name is Chris Lowe. I'm a borough resident. I have a fourth grader, well, almost fourth grader, a rising first grader, and a preschooler who's very annoyed that he's not already in the mix. So yeah, we'll see if it happens there. But I'm also an instructional coach in a neighboring district, so I work with teachers all the time. My wife's an SLP, so we think about these things a lot, probably talk about them too much. But as a teacher and a parent, I have to say, I do appreciate all the communication we've gotten from the school. We hear a lot from our teachers. I feel like I do know what's going on in the classroom. I also appreciate the district's efforts to let us know what's going on with curriculum, with Atlas. I'm excited. I am excited about Custodia. I think it'll be an interesting experiment just to get to more transparency there. So I think, we see that, and I appreciate that. I also looked at the ISTE research summary. And as an educator, one thing that stood out to me was the importance of educational technology supporting specific learning goals and being rooted in evidence and not just anecdotal claims. As an instructional coach, I sit in on a lot of vendor conversations from tech companies, and they do make a lot of claims. And they give away a lot of pens. I have like a whole drawer of pens. But I think, as a parent, I want to know that the district is choosing things very intentionally, and I think that EdTech does deserve more scrutiny than the average tool. If my student is using linking cubes in math class to support his understanding of place value, I don't really need someone to write a position statement on why that's a great tool. But I also don't think, at least not that I'm aware of, there's no research suggesting that linking cubes would potentially impact his attention or his focus or his socialization. And I don't have to argue with him on the weekend about whether or not he gets more linking cubes, for his free time. But EdTech does carry some of those risks, a lot of those risks, as we are learning. So I think it deserves more scrutiny, and I think my ask of the district is to just build on what we already have going in terms of the transparency. I know there's a list of apps that are available that are approved, but to my knowledge, I don't really see any strong connections between those apps and specific learning goals, by grade level or maybe by grade band. So I would love to see that. And I would also love to see, and I know I'm not alone in this, just more evidence about how the apps we're using in the classroom support learning. How do we know it's working? And let's go beyond the anecdotal claims and really dig into what the research says about these things. So I think if we could provide that to parents, kind of like a summary of what is the app, where is it getting used, and for what purpose, and then how do we know it works? I think that could go a long way for just reassuring families. many of whom are not anti-tech. I'm not anti-tech, but
30
we want
seconds.
more transparency, and I think that would go a long way. So I'm just going to suggest that we do that, and I'd be happy to support that and help with that in any way that I can. So thank you.
Thank you.
Lisa Longo?
Hi, Board. Thanks for having this discussion. I do want to remind the Board that committee meetings never had a time limit on them. I think it's really rude and disrespectful to tell people 3 minutes. This is where we're supposed to come to talk to you about concerns. So please consider doing away with that. It's just really rude. I'm going to start at the end. I was taking notes throughout this, and the one thought that came to me was, as we listen to the recommendations, what are the recommendations from the American Academy of Pediatrics with regard to screen time by age? Have they been considered? It's okay if there's not an answer in the moment, but also, does the NEA have any recommendations? Were they made with experts in mind? That could be a good starting point for some of these conversations. The impact on student mental health cannot be ignored with regard to screen time. We know we have an epidemic. I've been talking about this for 15 years, probably more now, how students have been impacted. Excuse me? I was saying this directly. Oh, okay. School is where students and children come to learn, and it's where they build habits. And if we teach them to go on screens, they're going to want to go on screens more. So while I understand that during COVID, we had to go to screens, and there was a reason for it, it is now up to us, the community, educators, students, and faculty, to understand we don't need to be there anymore, and we shouldn't be. Because the data shows that student outcomes were worse, right? Math and reading scores went down. Now, causation, correlation conversation, I know it's coming from somebody, but this is pretty clear. We had better outcomes when we used pencils. We had better outcomes when we talked, didn't type as much. Parent education events can be super useful, and I think I heard somebody mention something about that, so I think that's a great idea. But I think convening a task force immediately is really important. I also heard it said that teachers haven't been engaged in a meaningful way. I was shocked. Why haven't they been engaged? They should be here in this meeting, telling me what's happening in their classrooms, telling me what their parents and students are saying to them at every grade level. So a task force that meets every month with teachers, students, staff, all of us together, that's going to really help solve the problem. It's not going to solve it faster, but it's going to solve it better.
30 seconds.
I'd like to mention a different policy, just kind of jump over, reviewing the policy for having these meetings on Zoom or another social platform so more people can engage. That was something we used to do, and it is something we should consider bringing back. There are many people in the communities who can't be here. And look, when I was on the board, I will admit I was not a fan of it. And I was like, if you can't come, you shouldn't do it. I have had to eat crow and say I was wrong. I was wrong, and we should do that. I'd also love to see a policy banning single-use water bottles. Like, just let's throw that out there. If we're concerned about microplastics in our bodies and in our children's bodies, like, that's a really nice place to start. The last thing that I'd like to mention is please ban YouTube. There is no good use to YouTube in any classroom at any time. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to mess this one up. Rob Thorum? Thorum. My apologies.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Rob Thorum. I'm a borough resident with a rising kindergartner. I took a look at the district's position on educational technology, and I saw that it mentions that PDE requires digital citizenship instructions. One of the key components of digital citizenship is being able to evaluate the perspective of digital media. Beginning in grade 6, PDE standard 15.4.8.L asks for students to evaluate the accuracy and bias of online sources of information. So I applied this standard to the research summarized by ISTE, which was linked in the district's statement on ed tech. I took a look at the title, From Screen Time to Learning Time, a summary for evidence of technology in education. And I wanted to know more about the organization that put it together. ISTE is a nonprofit, and they rely on funding, grant funding, as well as some of their programs from big tech. They have received grants from Microsoft to advance AI for learning, from Google for AI teacher training, and their most recent annual conference contains a list of sponsors that's a who's who of tech: Microsoft, Google, Prodigy, Meta, and more. It should come at no surprise that they are advocating for ed tech in our schools and providing districts with resources to attempt to quell parent concerns. And yet, even with the backing of our country's major tech companies, they are unable to provide research or rationale for one-to-one devices in our schools. In fact, they state that ed tech is best when used selectively and applied to enrich, personalize, or extend instruction in ways that paper and pencil alone cannot. The standard then should not be consistent access to technology provided by one-to-one devices. It should be selective access to technology. As a teacher myself, I have seen the effect that one-to-one devices can have on a student's attention and focus. Even with guardrails in place, students are adept at finding activities on their devices that they consider more engaging than their assignments. It's truly impressive. Students will try to play a game, and if they can't play that game because it's blocked, they'll find another game that isn't. They don't even need the internet if they're using the Chrome browser, because there's that dinosaur jumping game. The district position states that guardrails are firmly in place. But if that's the case, then why are we considering an entirely new option to limit devices strictly to district-approved curricular resources?
30 seconds.
If the existing guardrails were that firm, there wouldn't need to be a special, more restrictive tier just to keep them on task with their schoolwork. In addition to games, students engage in tab hopping, where they have a browser open with multiple tabs. One of them will be for an assignment, but the other one will be for looking at pictures of their favorite celebrity, checking the weather, tracking flights, that was a new one from today, or looking at gifts they would like for their birthday. None of these are blocked by a web filter, and they are all more enticing than writing a paragraph or solving an equation. The shift away from one-to-one devices is not a call for the complete removal of technology, but a move toward the selective access model that aligns with the district's stated commitment to intentional high-impact use. I ask the board to consider why we are providing consistent access to the most distracting device in human history to our students, especially our youngest learners, when alternative options are available.
Diana Radati.
Hi, friends. I think I'm here for a little bit different of a reason, but it sort of bridges everything. Good evening. My name is Dina Radati, and I'm an 8th grade teacher at Phoenixville Area Middle School, and I've been here for almost 20 years. It's been a privilege the entire time. During my time here, our district has consistently provided students with a strong curriculum, meaningful resources, and opportunities for critical thinking in a safe, supportive environment. However, there's a proposed new middle school schedule that I don't feel is reflecting all of those high standards. Our district has always made decisions grounded in data and clear outcomes, and as teachers, we are modeling that same thing every day. We're using our data, and then we are coming up with our lesson plans from there. So my first concern is simple. Where is the data supporting this change in the schedule? No clear data has been provided to justify adding time to classes while removing an entire class period from the day. The only information that's been shared with our staff was a graph that's not clearly labeled. As a staff, as teachers, if we cannot interpret this data, how are we going to confidently guide our students? My second concern is, what is the end goal? If we are looking for success, how are we going to achieve it with this new plan? At this point, there is no clear plan, only the assurance that we will figure it out. Those are the answers that we've been given to 14 or more questions. We will figure it out. I know I speak for my colleagues when I say we understand that change is often necessary, Many of us have been here for 20 years or more. We've adapted to new buildings. We've taught through a global pandemic. We've shown flexibility when district calendars needed to change based on opening new buildings and the school year starting early, and then getting out earlier. We've collaborated with numerous administrators, district leaders. The common thread has always been careful planning, purposeful implementation, and putting the students first. But today I'm concerned. Where's the data? What's the plan? And how does this support children as a whole child? Outside of my classroom door hangs the district's equity philosophy. It states, equity is providing the necessary and attainable resources to students so that they may realize their full potential by creating meaningful, social and academic opportunities for all students. Please consider this when we are talking about this new schedule, because we want to continue to be able to create those meaningful social and academic opportunities for all of our students. Thank you for your time. If you have any other questions, you can feel free to email me, get together. I'm happy to provide you with any of the graphs and information that we've been shared with as teachers so that you can clearly understand what we don't understand. Thank you.
Colleen Phillips.
My name is Colleen Phillips, and I live in Schuylkill Township. When a post popped up on my Facebook feed highlighting technology use at Schuylkill Elementary last week, it caught my attention. Students in 3rd grade use AI responsibly to create food trucks and logos, and then invited their 3rd grade classrooms to come and place orders so that they could tally up and calculate profits. They then had to determine which menu items to keep and which to change based on sales performance of each item. I'm going to put aside my major grievance about 9-year-olds using AI, which doesn't seem to align with the district-approved educational resource list, and instead focus on the lesson itself. I was able to find multiple versions of this lesson online, and none of them incorporated AI. These lessons enabled students to use their creativity and design their own logo. They enabled students to hone their fine motor skills to decorate and construct a 3D model of their food trucks. Some lessons even ask students to go beyond the learning objectives of the lesson and calculate the area and perimeter of the different portions of their food trucks. But our students didn't get those experiences. The SAMR model is a framework that orders strategies for classroom technology implementation into 4 stages: substitution, augmentation, modification, and redefinition. If we try to figure out where this lesson falls on the SAMR model, I would argue that it doesn't have a place. The use of technology in this lesson actually took away from the students' experiences instead of adding to it. This is the only post that I've come across that features technology use in the district, so is this an example of purposeful ed tech? It's difficult to even have these conversations because the position statement doesn't define purposeful ed tech. We would be interested in hearing about a lesson at each level that sets that standard. If those lessons don't yet exist or are not implemented consistently, then where is information on professional development in the position statement? Even the document cited in the statement notes teachers are not adequately prepared to use technology effectively. Schools have invested heavily in devices, platforms, and digital tools, but not always in the professional learning and time needed to use those tools well. Our district's Facebook pages and Parent Square messages celebrate our students in the arts week after week, and rightfully so. All I've seen related to technology this year is this post, reminders to pay the technology fee, a message to handle technology with care, and information about the Canvas data breach. However, in board meetings, administration is pushing back against properly staffing our band and orchestra programs and asking for over $32,000 for Inventum for 1 school year. The dichotomy of what is being shown off to the general public and what is happening inside this room is baffling to me. Thank you for listening.
Alaire Southerton.
Good evening. We have listened to dozens of parents at multiple meetings this spring plead with the board and with admin to limit, not eliminate, but limit their children's access to one-to-one devices in ed tech. I'm very proud of everyone who's spoken on behalf of us, by the way. Families have argued that while we are doing our best to foster digital wellness at home, at school, these healthy boundaries that we have worked so hard to establish are being obliterated day after day. Even after this, even after our concerns about safety and privacy, data sharing, ads in our kids' learning apps, easily accessible, inappropriate content, the use of AI, heavily integrated gamified learning apps, overall technology dependence, even after all this, we don't frame this challenge as your problem. We view it as our collective problem. Which is why the families in our group were so frustrated this week at the technology position statement that threw little more than breadcrumbs at the topic of parent and community engagement. At the very end of this document that was published that we saw today, admin listed a parent portal, a monitoring app that they hope will foster trust and communication with parents. Not the workshops our group recommended to introduce these new apps to new families to the district. Not a committee that would include parent representatives, not a task force that would thoroughly investigate the issues of device usage, ed tech, and AI. Instead, 2 brand new additional steps that parents would have to take in the fall to ensure the safekeeping of their kids at school. This alone will not foster trust or build communication. I took a pre-Cana course before getting married to my husband, and while it mostly felt like a waste of a beautiful spring Saturday morning, I have held very tightly onto one of the speeches given that day. An older woman described marriages and all relationships as invisible emotional banks. And over the course of the relationship, it would be important, she said, to deposit positive experiences, small acts of kindness, etc. I forget the rest, it's not important. So that when those challenges arose, there would be a depth of connection and trust to pull from and to carry you through. I believe that the relationship that our group is building with the school district is very similar. Our families have communicated our goals transparently and honestly to all parties involved in the decision-making process. Our families have provided evidence, literature, context for our asks in the form of other school district policies, webinars with experts in this field.
30 seconds.
Our families have sacrificed their time on a consistent basis to listen and understand the board's process and admin's supposed limitations in this area. It would be really helpful, in addition to the document that we saw today, to maybe have a follow-up meeting that we were promised in April. Maybe this looks like a task force with parent representatives. Maybe this looks like parental participation in a wellness committee, because it's going to take more than telling us to engage with these apps to build trust and foster communication. We are seeing what is happening to other parent board marriages, relationships, specifically in Lower Merion, where parent voices are not valued. It's becoming increasingly litigious. Finally, our group recently shared a survey put together by PA Unplugged, a nonprofit that collects data across PA and uses this data to advocate for change at the state level. I was made aware that there was an email sent out instructing teachers not to fill out this survey. I'm having a hard time understanding why. When asked to share their experiences and contribute to a greater understanding of an issue that is currently plaguing our nation and the world right now, teachers in our district are being asked to stay silent. If PASD is committed to their approach in using internet-connected devices for learning, utilizing district-approved ed tech across all curriculum and grade levels, integrating AI into learning experiences, why would you not want teachers to share their experiences, their wins, what's successful, in addition to what's holding them back? Let them speak their truth. On this first day of Pride, I'll quote James Baldwin, who said, "The children are always ours, every single one of them. This is not James Baldwin, a rising tide lifts all ships. Let's hear from teachers, please."
Michelle Falsitano.
Hi, my name is Dr. Michelle Falsitano. I teach at Villanova Ethics and Philosophy, and I've been doing that for about 15 years now. I also have a child in first grade at the Early Learning Center, and I just want to start by thanking you all for your hard work and the care that you've given to these conversations and for giving us this opportunity to speak and give our opinions as well. Your continued commitment to keeping Phoenixville schools nurturing and engaging is very heartening in many ways. But I would also like to voice my strong support for this movement to reduce screen reliance and ed tech in our schools, particularly at the elementary level. I'm motivated by the following points. First, EdTech in many ways impedes educational objectives. Frequent screen use, which includes both tablet use and watching video, has been demonstrably proven to be at odds with the goals of education. It has been shown to reduce attention spans, to impair cognitive development and endurance, impedes the development of fine motor skills, and leads to reduced reading stamina and memory. I have citations for all of that. I, as an academic, have footnotes that I can provide and have emailed to the board as well. On the note of fine motor skills, there are conversations happening at medical schools about the deteriorating dexterity in students' hands, and they're having conversations about whether there's a crisis in the ability to recruit surgeons in the future because clicking and pointing is not developing the fine motor skills required to become an adequate surgeon. Studies have shown that writing by hand, reading physical books, and engaging with teachers are far superior in developing all of these skills. It is interesting to note that the people who invented and who profit from these technologies famously do not allow their own children to use them, choosing screen-free private schools instead while peddling this technology to our children instead. I would also be very interested in expanding efforts to educate parents on how to access the results of the assessments that are taken by these technologies, become more familiar with the games that they're playing at school, and also to be aware of the data that is being collected from our children. The second point I would like to mention is something that I haven't heard much talked about, is that television and video content should also be considered part of screen time in addition to just iPad usage. My child doesn't actually have too much interaction with his iPad. His teacher is really wonderful and engaging, but I know that there are children at the Early Learning Center who watch TV every day at school and snack time, every day at dismissal. Plus there are movies regularly and video movement breaks and video read-alouds and all kinds of extra video content, some of it educational and some of it is just regular television watching, which can certainly have a place as a reward here and there, but I would encourage some efforts to look into the frequency and duration of this usage.
30 seconds.
Video content can be very rich and act as a wonderful springboard for deeper exploration, but I worry about the effect high frequency use has on student expectations and social development, all of which are fostered always much more by free unstructured play with their peers. And finally, and I'll keep this very brief, EdTech is not tech ed. While I understand that there's a need to use technology for testing and to learn about technology, EdTech does not teach children how to create meaningful technology or even use the tools that are available to them accurately. My husband is an electrical engineer. He has seen this and he says this is not preparing them to work in technology. They're primed instead for clicking, for social media usage and passive consumption. And with the growth of AI, students will be pushed increasingly towards prepackaged information consumption without critical thinking and discernment. And as an educator myself, I already see this happening in higher education. Students summarizing, having AI summarize their readings instead of doing them themselves. Students who are unable or express visible agitation at the idea of writing for themselves without relying on an AI generator to help get them started.
Time is up.
So just want to thank you again for considering all of this. Our young children are given such a gift with their teachers, and I would just love to make sure that we are striving towards a balanced approach that allows our teachers to use technology as a tool for creating self-driven learners and not just encountering it as an inevitability or an obstacle that they have to work around. Thank you very much.
Stephanie Nicolisi?
Hi, it's Stephanie Nicolosi. Oh, that's fine. No worries. I had trouble with it first, too. It's not mine originally. So I've heard that you speaking towards, well, first I should say that I'm a continuous improvement manager in my work. And before that, with doing iterative improvement with Danaher Business Systems. And before that, I was basically tech support for a microscope company for multiple years. So I'm in a life science research capacity. So I'm knowledgeable to some extent for a lot of these things. And one of the things that I've noticed is not just a lack of communication, as you've mentioned, but a lack of quality data. I have yet to be convinced that high quality instructive equals ed tech. which is, I think has been mentioned before. And I have not seen any data that has convinced me that it is such. But I also think that we have a lack of guidance, guardrails, and accountability, which I think you do agree with me to some extent, but I feel there's quite a bit more needing to be done. I don't believe in a balanced kind of middle ground. I believe in a more restrictive than permissive balance here because of many of the arguments that you've already heard and I won't go into. And additionally, when you don't have quality data, in the interim, while you work to get quality data, you lean on the voice of customers and stakeholders, which are us, your parents, et cetera. And most of the teachers I've talked to state they can't get by the data points provided by EdTech alone. And I know it's sexy, it's awesome, you know, it's really easy to get data, you know, if you're just inputting it into a computer system already provided for you. But is that quality data? Are we actually comparing that to what we were doing before EdTech? So if the parents and teachers are already stating that they can't go by these data points alone, that sometimes it's even more difficult for them in the younger years, are we really getting stakeholder input to the level that we need it? And to your point that an immediate pivot may not be possible because we've already have these contracts. Well, my question then would be to, do we have to pay this in full if there is a break or modification of our contracts, or is it just a penalty? Because then that might actually still free up some immediate funds. I don't have any insight to that. Obviously, you would. And I would love to see personally that we get feedback before the end of the school year, because as we all know, it takes time. Thank you. Thank you for remembering. To get quality feedback and action on it. And I also noticed that you mentioned that you're blocking gaming sites, but I didn't hear you specifically say gamification of our apps, like Prodigy. Some of our school-sanctioned apps are more educationally lightweight and lean more heavily towards gaming. In my personal opinion, I've had to fight with my children to not use certain apps on their computer that seemed just like garbage, honestly. And I would have to hold a gun to their head to actually get them to use the exact path. I mean, they hate it. And that's what I hear being lauded as a quality program. Oh, my time. Thank you. Thank you for your time. Didn't quite get to everything, but I'll write you as per usual.
Thank you. Jennifer Bravo.
Hi, everyone. Working off a phone here as my daughter distracted me while sobbing, so forgot my paper. Jennifer Bravo, I live in East Pikeland, and my daughter is starting kindergarten here in the fall. As some of you are already aware, I filed a right-to-know request for the contracts and data sharing agreements for all platforms approved for use at PALC. I didn't do it to be a pain in the ass. I didn't do it to find a smoking gun. I asked because I genuinely wanted to know what information about my kid is going to be shared with which companies and what are they allowed to do with it. There are more than 30 platforms approved for use at PALC. For the vast majority of them, more than half, no agreement, invoice, or data sharing document of any kind was produced in response to my request. For the platforms where something was produced, not a single document demonstrates that student data is being shared under terms that meet federal law. That includes the footnotes and the web links and fine print that I was directed to. I read it. I didn't have AI read it for me. An attorney has also provided a sworn affidavit that no other relevant documents exist. I'm not here to accuse anyone of being out of compliance, but the board needs to understand that if someone did, The district cannot currently prove them wrong. The district's plan to post links to privacy policies is a small step towards transparency, which I appreciate. But a vendor privacy policy tells you what they say they're going to do. It is not an agreement about what they are specifically obligated to do between them and this district. Only one of those two things protects our kids. Our parents didn't know what they were agreeing to when the internet arrived. They didn't know better. My generation does not have that excuse. We know enough to be able to admit that the full consequences of the choices we're making today will not be understood for years. We're making those choices right now for our kids, and without an opt-out, we're being forced to do it without the documentation that tells us what we're actually agreeing to. I don't want my kids to find out the hard way in 20 years. And I certainly don't want them to be able to ask me why I didn't do more to protect them when we should have known better. When it comes to our kids' privacy, we have the right to know. And I believe that you have the responsibility to be able to answer when we ask.
30 seconds.
Until the specifics of data sharing and security have been documented as required and made available to parents, I am begging you, please pump the brakes or let us get off the train by way of an opt-out. Thank you.
Brian Albany.
Good evening, everybody. I'm going to thank Brian Albany from East Pikeland Township. I want to start by thanking the board and the administration for their quick action regarding screen use during recess in the Early Learning Center. Following an early April meeting with concerned parents, the administration moved to end tablets during recess in the May board meeting, a common sense proposal that took about 2.5 weeks to turn around and implement. At that same meeting, it's my understanding that the administration made clear that in the Early Learning Center, tablets are merely present as a means to supplement the learning that the teachers are conducting. That means the teachers already have the books, they have the worksheets, they have the supplies necessary to teach the children. The tablets are merely there to supplement. Based on that assessment, I was troubled to learn that the same swift action has not been taken to put an opt-out from educational technology into the ELC for the upcoming year for kindergarten and first grade. You have the books, you have the supplies. It would be common sense to swiftly move on implementing an opt-out for K and 1 for the 2026-2027 school year. I've read the recently distributed district position on ed tech and screen time. I've read the bullet points that you are reviewing here. About the potential implementation of an opt-out. Only one truly stuck out to me as a meaningful reason to not immediately make it available, and that was the bullet on consideration of multi-lease and licensing agreements, essentially the money being spent on one-to-one devices and ed tech platforms associated. And the reason that this isn't terribly meaningful to me as a parent, but it highlights that for you, the administration and the school board, that there is a fear that if an opt-out is immediately implemented, that there would be a material amount of students that would be opted out in K through 1 that would, make those budget outlays close to worthless for the funds that it might look like they've been mismanaged, or until correctly right-sized in future years, it would look like that, right? And if that is indeed the fear, it kind of gives away to me the thought here, right? That the wind of public opinion is not blowing towards a tablet for every kindergartner, and that technology first, or even supplemented educational experiences in younger years is the way the public is thinking. Guys, you have the books, you have the worksheets, you have the supplies. Swiftly make the common sense changes to connect with where the community is. Thank you.
Bridget Connolly, excuse me.
Hi, my name is Bridget Connolly. I live in East Pikeland Township, and I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and I am strongly considering what to do in 2 years because the one-to-one device use honestly terrifies me. So I'm voicing my support as well. This is going to be a little repetitive, to roll back one-to-one device use for K through 2 by the fall of 2027, or implement a pause. And so that's actually what I want to speak about tonight and cite a resolution that was passed by the Cambridge Public Schools in April of this year. This district ranks in the top 3.5% of the country's public schools. And I quote, "The American Academy of Pediatrics has repeatedly emphasized, including in recent guidance published in Pediatrics, that excessive or non-purposeful screen use during the school day can displace critical developmental activities such as physical movement, peer interaction, play, and self-regulation, particularly for younger children. Recent large-scale observational research and surveys reported in The Lancet and its affiliated journals have raised concerns about associations between higher screen exposure in childhood and adverse outcomes related to attention, emotional regulation, mental health, and physical well-being, reinforcing calls for precautionary limits in educational settings. The guidance cited herein is particularly urgent for younger children, for whom screen exposure significantly displaces these foundational activities. And therefore, the committee has determined that a precautionary pause is most urgently warranted for students grades pre-K through grade 2. It goes on to cite exceptions for IEP, for ESL, an application of tech that is clearly allowed. For example, teacher-directed projection of district-approved curriculum as part of a direct instruction. So again, not one-to-one. So we are asking the administration not to reject technology. As Dan said, you are all the experts. We trust you. But instead, we ask you to take direct action and treat this as an urgent matter, especially for the youngest minds. Developmental appropriateness should guide technology decisions, not device availability or a lease agreement. I appreciate the collaboration, and I look forward to working with you all on a multi-tiered solution, as you said. Thank you.
Greg Spoto? Did I get it right?
Spotto, but
Spotto. Sorry, man.
Happens all the time. Thank you for your time. Stated, my name is Greg Spotto. I live in Phoenixville. I have a second grader at Harris Hill. We actually met 2 weeks ago to reintroduce myself. I'm a program manager at Lockheed Martin. There, I work on satellite ground systems. I lead large teams through multi-year efforts at the highest levels of information security. A successful effort to me includes making sure my team's work not only conforms to policy for security, but also that the results of our work has enduring security into the future. In short, I am in the field. Some axioms my team hears as I lead them, which are hear from me frequently, relevant to our conversation today. All problems start as communication problems. A policy is hope written down. Hope is not a plan. And the phrase my team fears the most, maybe I am dumb, but. The first half of my weekend was spent managing my son's disappointment that I was not going to buy a subscription to Bottle Premium. Bottle is one of the gamified learning apps that we have supplied on his school-supplied laptop, or his iPad. His arguments, which were very articulate, included how he could gain levels with more powerful pets and attacks, and how if I buy the annual subscription, it would be better for me than buying the monthly subscription. The second half of my weekend was spent reviewing the school's policy, which we are talking about today. So thank you for publishing that in advance. In review of the administration's position, I am glad that it's recognized that there's a difference between general screen time and instructional classroom screen time. I agree. It goes on to say that there is a difference between consumer technology and ed tech. We'll get to that. And that not all screen time is equal. Again, I agree. And with guardrails firmly in place, our focus continues to be on the quality of ed tech implementation in our classrooms. So to those guardrails. Options being considered, as we talked about today, is the whitelist opt-in. In furtherance for the guardrails already in place, this option would allow families to opt in to a more restrictive internet filtering policy that limits access on district devices to only district-approved curricular resources, aka whitelisting. Maybe I'm dumb, but the whitelist option includes providing access to only district-approved EdTech resources. Doesn't that mean that there is access to non-district and non-EdTech resources now? Doesn't that mean that right now we're not following policy?
30 seconds.
The answer to that rhetorical question is yes, because the opt-in option has restrictive modes for YouTube, Roblox, Fortnite, TikTok, many other social media and game options. Maybe I'm dumb, but those games and media access do not at all meet the definition of quality ed tech. To address the statement of the difference between consumer tech and ed tech, I certainly appreciate the difficulty that comes with using consumer technology to deliver on goals, but you cannot disassociate the responsibility of delivering on those goals from the means on which they are delivered. Consumer tech is part of this problem, is part of the conversation, and you cannot divorce them, and it is clear from all the conversations we've had today that they are intrinsically linked. A policy is not a plan. A plan includes how are we enforcing these policies. What happens with the opt-in is not included. How do we continue to deliver on ed tech related access and not divorce our responsibility to write it off as a consumer technology problem? How do we measure reducing access and gamified learning? The communications needed that we've talked about are the first step, but much more communication is needed with the administration, the school board, and as parents to start delivering solutions to these problems. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no more.
I believe you skipped someone, myself.
Skipped? What's your name?
I would have been between Alaire and Michelle Meredith Stradley.
Meredith Stradley, I'm so sorry. Yes, I did. My sincere apologies.
It's me again. Of East Pikeland Township, Meredith Stradley. I want to start off this evening by saying really, truly, thank you for your time and attention on these issues so far. We have a long way to go together, but I understand that this is hard work. Mr. Oberker, Dr. Bassito, I really appreciate your comments tonight. I do disagree with quite a few still. That's okay, okay? This is a journey. A quick disclaimer here, I am an engineer turned lawyer, so here we go with some legal talk, I apologize. In every child safety domain outside the home, responsibility is formally bound to an accountable institution. That binding is visible through insurance, licensure, inspection, and legal liability. When harm occurs, there is a clear duty bearer, a reconstructible chain of events, and a mechanism for correction. Responsibility is not theoretical, it is contractually and legally attached to someone who can be held accountable. Schools are legally responsible for the environment in which students learn and interact. So let's think about this. Buses are insured, teachers are vetted, buildings are inspected, visitors are background checked and board approved. This legal responsibility extends to technological devices. When a school issues or requires a device, whether used on school property or at home, the digital environments that specific device enables fall within the school's scope of legal responsibility. Now let's consider this as it applies to artificial intelligence or AI, to which the district has failed to address thus far in our conversations with you. AI refers broadly to computational systems that perform tasks traditionally associated with human judgment, pattern recognition, prediction, and decision making. More specifically, generative AI is probabilistic. It does not just rank or select content, it produces new content in real time. Adults are unable to supervise generative AI systems, not only because they cannot see the same content as another user, but because no one can reliably predict or preview what will be generated. And often it is impossible to recreate where that information came from. What is more concerning is in cases in which generative AI systems take on a conversational role. Generative AI systems produce probabilistic novel outputs. A subset of these systems operate in an open-ended conversational or advisory capacity, including ChatGPT. That role carries heightened governance implications because it mirrors functions historically reserved for identifiable, accountable adults. Let me remind you that for any human occupying the role of advisor or conversationalist with a student, we require that human to, at a minimum, be background checked and supervised. But we do not require the same of a generative AI system, even when the generative AI system is serving the same conversational space as a teacher. This means that no one, not even our best and most capable teachers, can supervise another's use of generative AI systems. Or, to refer to Dr. Bassito's framing, this is not simply another game of whack-a-mole. Generative AI is an entirely unwhackable mole. Mr. Obrecker uses the term guardrails consistently. There are no guardrails that exist that that could possibly exist to put around generative AI systems. As a parent, this means that I know that my child is unsupervised anytime he uses a generative AI system on a PASD device. This is terrifying. No parent sends their child to school expecting their child to be unsupervised at any point during the day. From a legal standpoint, insurers know this. Just this year, several insurance companies have begun excluding liability or harms arising from generative AI systems. I will go into this in more detail in my email. So why am I talking about this? When Mr. O'Brucker just said that AI tools are blocked on student devices, because respectfully, you're wrong. The district's list of district-approved education technology resources as of today lists ChatGPT as the only approved Gen AI system and is only approved for grades 9 through 12, according to your website. However, the middle school's 2025-26 school handbook, student handbook, permits the use of district-approved tools such as Copilot, Magic School, School AI, Diffit, Curopod. This is in direct conflict with the district-approved tools list on the website that I just referenced, which only lists ChatGPT. Not only does the handbook list a plethora of systems not on the approved list, but the handbook also permits middle school students to partake, which is not indicated on the website. Finally, going back to what Colleen Phillips mentioned earlier today, or a few minutes ago, please let me draw your attention to a social media post made by Schuylkill Elementary last week. On Tuesday, May 26th, Schuylkill Elementary boasts, students in 3rd grade use AI responsibly to create food trucks and logos. Listen, I have yet to meet an adult that can responsibly use AI. Okay, so we cannot and should not ask of our students, let alone an 8-year-old, to replace creative thinking, learning, decision-making, and human judgment with AI. Let me opt my children out. Thank you.
Okay. Everybody, I called everybody. All right, so with that, we are going to adjourn our meeting. Our next meeting is not until August 24th. Put that on your calendar, and that will be immediately following the curriculum committee meeting. Thank you for your attention.